Hurt. It's the only word I know to use. It's funny how people say they care, but then their actions cause nothing but pain and hurt. I try to reason why within myself, and I come up with nothing. Instead, all I can think about are your words. My companion attacks his friends. He violates his covenant. His talk is smooth as butter, yet war is within his heart. His words are more smooth than oil, yet they are drawn swords. It's exactly how I feel. I called them friends, but they attacked me. They said one thing and did another. The hurt doesn't go away. In fact, it only gets worse. And I ask myself, what am I supposed to do? The only answer I can come up with is this: cast your cares on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. But you, God, will bring down the wicked into the pit of decay. The bloodthirsty and deceitful will not live out half their days.
Focus in on today's message on one word of that: sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I want to focus in on hurt. What happens when we're hurting? What happens when we're facing struggle? What happens when those things happen to us, either done by other people or done to ourselves, and we find ourselves hurting? Where does our mind go? You know, the first church I ever worked in, there may be people watching right now or people that watch later may hear some things they've never known. The first church I ever worked in, I'm just going to be really transparent this morning because Amber and I were talking yesterday in the car, and here's the reality. When you're talking about a subject like this, I need you to know where I'm coming from, because we've all experienced hurt. But if I can't be transparent with you, why do I expect you to be transparent with anybody else? Is that fair? The first church I ever worked at, I worked for a pastor who was very different behind closed doors than what he was to our congregation. A while back, we talked about church hurt earlier this year. I got I got technically my second dose of church hurt. This church I went to until I was in second grade split. My mom was very hurt out of that. I didn't really understand a lot, but I understand my mom was hurting. But this one was where I really experienced, and my family experienced, church hurt. I worked under a pastor who, behind closed doors, would say and do things that should have made a non-Christian blush. There were 4 of us on staff, and when I say staff, I want to use that term loosely because we were 1 full-time pastor, 2 part-time pastors, and 1 volunteer pastor. And when I say part-time, I mean full-time work for part-time pay, if y'all know what I mean. But the things that were said and done behind closed doors when I worked at that church hurt so bad that honestly, when I started thinking about leaving, didn't know if I'd ever step back into ministry again. I tried to get help, but nobody believed me because he had everybody fooled. Do you know anybody like this? The one person to everybody else, but then you get treated a very different way? It was the most miserable one of the most miserable set of 2 years of my life. And still to this day, I cringe when I think about some of the things that happened. But here's what I learned. I learned that God never allows you to experience pain if He doesn't have a purpose for it. So, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit, but God never allows you to experience pain without giving you a purpose. And here's the thing. I know sometimes, especially for all of us, but especially for this group down here, for our college and high school and middle school students, can I just say to you, sometimes what I'm getting ready to say sounds very cliche, especially coming from a pastor, but can I tell you that I mean it with all the sincerity that I have in me? If there's anybody who's ever understood hurt, it was Jesus. If there's one person that I can always count on to understand the pain I'm going through, it's Jesus. For us adults, I'm sure we can testify because of what we've been through in our life. And some of you have unfortunately been through some things that most adults don't go through their entire life. And so you can testify to some pain in your own life. But Jesus, and everything, being the only perfect human being to ever walk the earth, walked through a time or times when he was absolutely hurt. Like, I've thought about that a lot of times, and I can't in my mind fathom walking with Jesus and seeing the things he's doing and finding a way to hurt him. But guess what? He walks with me every day, and I still find ways to hurt him. So today I want to talk about how Jesus understands our hurt. And I'm going to share some things with you today, and I'm going to get really open, okay? I'm just going to give you a disclaimer. If you're watching online or if you're in-house, it's going to get very real in here today. Because, again, God never gives a pain without a purpose. And he never wants us to hide the pain, because there are other people who need to know that it's okay to be open about your pain. It's okay to find people who can talk to you, who can help walk you through the things that they've already been healed from or are healing from. And so in order to open this all up, we're going to really get open and transparent today. So you guys just hang with me, because we're going to roll through this stuff. If you have your copy of scripture with you today, we're going to be in Luke chapter 22. For the majority of our time today, we're going to move over just a little bit. I've got a couple other verses on the screen here in a little bit, but here's the very first thing in your notes. Let me just say this. If you're in-house, there were sheets at the front and back. If you got one, great. If not, don't worry about it. You can pop open your mobile app and go to sermon notes or sermon outline on your mobile app, and you can keep track with everything there, and then you can email them to yourself. So if you're at home and you're not watching on the app, you can open up your phone, download our app, or if you already have it, open up the sermon outline, and you can follow along, fill in the notes for today, and then you can email them to yourself once you're done to hang on to if you want to do that. So here's the first thing that Jesus experienced, or not the first thing, but it was one of the things that Jesus experienced. He was betrayed. Jesus was betrayed. Look in Luke 22, 47 through 53. Here's what it says. But as Jesus said this, no, he was just dealing with the disciples at the Mount of Olives, and we're going to come back to that here in just a minute when he was asking them to pray with them, and we'll get back to all that. But it says in verse 47, but as Jesus had said this, a crowd approached, led by Judas, one of the 12 disciples. Judas walked over to Jesus to greet him with a kiss, but Jesus said, Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? When the other disciples saw what was about to happen, they exclaimed, Lord, should we fight? We brought the swords. And one of them struck at the high priest's slave, slashing off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus spoke to the leading priests, the captains of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him. Am I some dangerous revolutionary, he asked, that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there every day, but this is your moment, the time when the power of darkness reigns. God, I just pray, we're going to read more out of your word today, but God, I pray that more than anything else that happens in this place today, God, that the power of your word would speak. That's where true power is found. And so, God, would you use it to change our hearts today? In your name we pray. Amen. Look, Jesus was betrayed. Can you imagine? Let's back up just a little bit. Jesus and his disciples are sitting in the upper room having the Last Supper. And I've shared this with you all before because it's one of my most favorite places in all of Scripture. Because the writers who were sitting at the table, the ones who were there, who wrote all this down, they used terminology to help us understand even the emotion happening in the room. This is one of my favorite points of all of Scripture. When you read about what was happening in the upper room, the writer specifically stated that Jesus was reclined at the table. You know what that tells me? He was in the presence of his friends. Because when I go to dinner with my friends, I don't sit clenched up. I kick back at the table, and with my family, I kick back at the table, and I enjoy being relaxed with my friends and with my family. We all do that, right? We all do that. And so Jesus was in the midst of his family and his friends, and he was reclined at the table with them. But at one point, the scripture says, and he sat up. You ever been in a group of people where everything's going good, and then somebody all of a sudden, the demeanor in the room changes, and they all of a sudden tell you something serious that you didn't see coming? That's kind of how I imagine, because of how they wrote about this earlier on, this actually taking place. Jesus sits up and his entire demeanor changes. And he begins to tell them about what's going to happen. And everybody's like, no, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But what happens? Judas gets paid off. He somehow or another found enough money to get paid off to betray the Savior of the world. And can I say this? Judas got paid a lot more than many of us have gotten paid to betray the Savior of the world. We have betrayed him for a lot less than what Judas received. I know I told you that I was going to get real today. I'm about to get real right now. With the permission and the pushing of my wife. 6.5 years ago, I experienced betrayal from the person that means the most in the world to me. We went through the worst time in our life. The details of everything that happened right now don't matter. But all of a sudden, my entire world was upside down. My marriage was upside down. I've got a 4-year-old and one that's not even a year old. The church I'm working at lets me go. Can't even come back to church there. Her job lets her go. All because of what? Because of betrayal. What do you do? I've got 2 little girls, and I've got a house payment, and I've got student loan payments, and we all know how ruthless they are. I've got light bills and groceries, and what do you do when you're hurt to that kind of level? The answer is, when it happens, you have no idea. Had it not been for a few key people that were connected to us, that helped us take one step forward, and then another step forward, and then another step forward, I don't know if we'd have ever made it out of that season. Let me just say, it was God. So don't mistake what I'm saying. It was God, okay? But God was using his people to help us try to figure out how to put one foot in front of the other. You don't know what's going to happen from one thing to the next. But all I knew at that point was that I hurt. And then she hurt. And then a lot of people close to us hurt. Because you know the thing about hurt, can I share something that's really profound but very simple? Have you ever been out to a pond and threw rocks into a pond? Anybody in here ever done that? Skip. None of y'all threw rocks in a pond before? I mean, geez. If you're online and you threw rocks in a pond, do me a favor, throw a hand emoji up in there, because nobody in here is wanting to do it. So, goodness gracious. Have you ever noticed what happens? You take a rock and you throw it into a pond, and what happens? Ripple effect. The same thing happens with hurt. When that initial stone is thrown, when the initial word is thrown, when that action is done. Yeah, I might have gotten struck first, but then there was more striking, and more striking, and more striking, and more pain. And that's how hurt works in our life. It's like a ripple effect. And Jesus understood betrayal, and he understood pain. But let's back up a few verses. Here's number 2 in your notes, and we're going to keep this going. His disciples did not spend time with him when he needed it the most. He needed somebody in that moment. He needed his disciples, and they did not spend time with him when he needed it the most. just before he's to be betrayed. Now let's keep something in mind. Jesus is 100% fully man, yet 100% fully God. So he knew what was coming. So imagine, you can't, but try imagining the weight of knowing what's next. And the men that are closest to him, he says this right here. Look, let's read it. In fact, let's back up to verse 39. Then, accompanied by the disciples, Jesus left the upstairs room, went as usual to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, "Pray that you will not give in to temptation." He walked away about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me, yet I want your will to be done and not mine." Then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. He prayed more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. At last, he stood up again and returned to the disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you will not give in to temptation." Do you see what's happening? They got so self-centered in the moment, all they could focus on was their grief. It was all about them in that moment. And grief will suck us in and make us think that it's all about me. You know, we do grief share here on Monday nights, and one thing that we tell people is that grief is, and I've not been, and I say we, I've not been involved in that in some time, but Melinda and Andrea and the other leaders in there, they tell that grief is not all about you. The grief is, yes, it's partly about you, but it's about other people too, and it's about what God can do through you in the lives of other people. You see, Jesus, he was, in essence, in that moment, depending on these guys to pray for him and to pray for themselves, because he knew what was coming and he didn't want them to fall into temptation of doing the wrong things. He says it, pray so that you won't fall into temptation. Because can I tell you something about what happens with hurt? Remember what I said a minute or two ago? You say things, you do things, and you think things you never thought you would when you're hurting. I have this saying I like to use with people, especially with people that come to my office for counseling, and you're only one bad day, one bad decision from being that one person or doing that one thing you said you would never become or do. I know how we look at people when we hear about things some people do. But can I tell you something? That could be you. We're broken people. You ever heard somebody say this? Hurt people hurt people. We're very good about throwing stones when we're hurt. And Jesus was trying to tell us, look, you need people around you. Not only to pray for you, but those people who are going to get hurt in the process, they need to be praying that they don't fall into making some bad decisions because of the hurt they're experiencing. So when we were going through what we did, the pastor at the church we were at the time, he looked at me in his office and he said, "I'm going to be here for you every step of the way, even though you can no longer be employed here." Now, I'm not casting stones. I just want you to understand how significant this statement was. I hadn't done what got us to the point where we're at. Okay, that was not me. But I'm not casting a stone at my wife. Look, God has done some incredible things in our life, and I love her now more than I ever have. And now we're using the reason that we're sharing this, and it was her urging me to share this so that we can help other people who are going through this. Because if you don't know other people have been through it, you're not going to know where to look for help. And if you're going through this, let me just say right now, let me just pause and say, if you need help, come to find us. We will help you. We'll take all the time in the world with you. If you're watching online, maybe you're not connected with our church at all, pick up the phone and call me tomorrow. Send me an email tonight. We'll help you because some people helped us. And that's what Christ followers do. But Jesus wanted these men to pray not only for him, but for themselves, because in the pain and hurt they were experiencing, he didn't want them to fall into temptation and make the wrong decisions. Look, the pastor in the church who I had watched for 7 years go with people to the ends of the earth with situations they were in. I just knew, I actually said it to Amber before, I could always rest assured that if anything ever happened to us, whatever it might be, that they would walk with us through it and help us through that, including the leadership. And you know what? They fired me, told everybody I quit. They helped me financially for a couple of months, which I'm very thankful for, because I don't know what we would have done had that not happened. So let me say thank you where thank you is due. But I desperately wanted a pastor who could love on me and a church family, and we didn't have that anymore. It was gone. Only, I would say, one couple, really. We saw him yesterday. Amber saw him yesterday. Well, I wasn't with her at that point, but we still spend time with them. We still do Christmases and Thanksgivings together, because you know what? They stood with us through the fire. And as believers in Christ, that's what we're called to do. We're called to walk with people through the fire. If you can't do that for somebody, let me say this. I was in a youth pastors conference when I was youth pastor for 10 years, in case you don't know that. I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in this little breakout session at a youth pastors conference, about 5,000 other youth pastors there. And this guy in this little breakout session, he made a statement that changed my life, that I didn't realize changed my life. It was 4 years prior to everything that happened to us. And the moment she told me what was going on was the moment that I thought about that for the first time in 4 years. Because God planted it in my heart 4 years prior to this happening, and I never thought about it again. And when in the moment it happened, it was literally, my brain went back to that classroom and to that gentleman. I couldn't tell you his name, but let me just tell you, I can't take credit for this. He said it, not me. But this is what he said. You can never claim to have received extreme forgiveness if you're not willing to offer it in return. You can never claim to have received extreme forgiveness. And when I say extreme forgiveness, that's the forgiveness Jesus gives you and me. If you can't offer that back in return, you better check real strong and hard whether you have it to begin with. Because we're supposed to give, Jesus even gave a number just to try to get us to see what he was saying, 70 times 7, and then more what he was trying to say is it just never stops. Sometimes we don't keep those same people in our life because it's not good for us healthy, but we have to forgive them and move on. Be cordial to them. You may not be in your close circle, but you have to be willing to forgive them. Here's the third thing in your notes. One of his closest friends denied knowing him. One of his closest friends denied knowing him. Look over in verse 54 in Luke 22. So they arrested him and led him to the high priest's home, talking about Jesus, and Peter followed at a distance. What an interesting statement. Peter followed at a distance. He didn't want to be too close. You see what's happening? The guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat around it, and Peter joined them there. A servant girl noticed him in the firelight and began staring at him. Finally, she said, "This man was one of Jesus' followers." But Peter denied it. "Woman," he said. Obviously, Peter wasn't married. Because we all know if we call our wives woman, that does not, I see some of y'all wives looking at your husbands. Y'all already know. So all you single guys in the house, take this for a learning curve. Don't ever call your wife woman, or your girlfriend woman, or your fiance woman. Okay? Ladies, you can call him whatever you want. Just don't you ever call her woman. Okay? I'm not going to repeat what he said to her, but then he said, "I don't even know him." After a while, someone else looked at him and said, "You must be one of them." That's crazy. She had just seen him. But he looked so much like Jesus and the other guys that were his disciples that she recognized him based on what she saw. Do people recognize you that way? When you walk into a room, can people tell a difference? She said, "You must be one of them." He said, "No, man, I am not. About an hour later, someone else insisted, this must be one of them because he's a Galilean too. And Peter said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And at that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. And Peter left the courtyard weeping bitterly. The guards in charge of Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and said, prophesy to us. Who hit you that time? And they hurled all sorts of terrible insults at him. Peter the rock. Peter who will build the church. Denied Jesus 3 times. Was recognized simply because of who he was. But yet denied Jesus. I can't even though Jesus knew, I can't imagine the hurt he must have felt. But I've got some inkling, because let me tell you why. When we went through what we did, I was in a pastor's small group. Been doing it for 6 years. Met every Thursday morning at the same restaurant. Bible study, we read books together, we prayed for one another, we were accountability partners. So when everything happened and came out about us, it was on a Wednesday. The next morning, I went to my small group and I just said, I didn't know where else to go. And I went to those guys and I said, I got nobody else to go to right now. I don't know what to do. And I told them what happened, and they prayed with me. And when I left that restaurant that morning, all I could think about was, I'm so thankful I got these guys in my corner. You know the next time I heard from one of them? 6 months. 6 months. You talk about hurt. I was dumbfounded. I felt like I've been denied by my friends. And it was eating me alive inside. Now, I talk to them some now, but can I just, I do enjoy talking to them, and one of them, last week, they were in Kentucky because his wife's dad passed away. Her mom had just passed away 2 months prior to this, and so, they text me and asked me if I'd pray for them, and let me just be honest with you, I do love these guys. They played a very pivotal role in my life. But can I tell you that it's different now for me? Not because I don't love them, not because I don't want the best for them, not because I don't support them, but man, you left me hanging. I forgive them. Let me say that publicly. I do. I with 100% sincerity, I did. It took me a long time, but I genuinely forgive them. But it's just not the same. It's hard for me to explain. It's hard for me to. The crazy part I think about when I think about Jesus and his understanding of hurt is not only did he forgive him, but he's without sin. So he never sinned in his mind. Like, I'll be honest with you, those things I thought and things that I wanted to say, and because I was so angry, he never did that. But he understands what we go through. And he understands when we're denied by the people that are close to us. Here's the 4th thing in your notes. We're going to roll through this last part kind of quick after we get done with this one. A lot of people turned against him. A lot of people turned against him. In Luke 23, verses 13 through 19, it says this. Then Pilate called together the leading priests and the other religious leaders along with the people, and he announced his verdict. Jesus had just been on trial, and this is what Pilate said. You brought this man to me, accusing him of leading a revolt. I have examined him thoroughly on this point in your presence, and I find him innocent. It feels so good when somebody looks at you and says, innocent, not guilty. Herod came to the same conclusion and sent him back to us. Nothing this man has done calls for the death penalty, so I will have him flogged and then I will release him. But listen to what happens next. Then a mighty roar rose from the crowd, and with one voice they shouted, "Kill him and release Barabbas to us." Barabbas was in prison for taking part in an insurrection in Jerusalem against the government and for murder. In the blink of an eye, a lot of people turned against him. The Savior of the world. He had fed, we call it the feeding of the 5,000, but we're betting it's somewhere between 10 and 15,000, actually. He walked on water. And I love what John says at the end of his book. He said, these things were written so that you would believe. But there's much more than this. So what did Jesus do that we don't know about? All of that, all of the good, and yet this crowd turned against him in the blink of an eye. You see, the church that we were at, they resigned for me. I wasn't given an option. We would be in Walmart. We were still in that community for 3 years after this. Until we came here. We would see people in that church in Walmart, and they would turn and walk the other way. Still to this day, we have family there. We'll be in Walmart. We will run into people from that church who will turn around and walk the other direction when they see us coming. People who we had deep relationships with before we left. And I'm going to tell you, for a long time, that hurt. But God in His sovereignty, in the last 3 years, well, really the last 6 years, because of the church we were at in the 3-year hiatus that I took from ministry for our family to heal, and the church we found when we came here, and the people that God has placed in our lives over the course of that 6.5 years, God has replaced. There's a part in Scripture that God talks about locusts, because locusts come and they devour. But there's going to come a time where God's going to return the years of the locust, is what the Scripture says. In other words, He's going to bring new. He's going to replenish and replace. And God has, not only has He brought replenishment and replacement to our life, but He's done it in overabundance. So now, if that happens, it might be my odd sense of humor, but I kind of get tickled anymore. Because I think back to when that used to hurt me so bad. And now, in God's sovereignty, He has given me more than I deserve. More than I could have come up with myself. And He's done more in my life than I could have ever imagined. In our lives, not my life, our lives. And the cool thing is He can do the same thing in yours. Today's not about me. What our prayer has been through today was that you would see the goodness of God. That you would see that the God of restoration and the God of healing and the God of His promises is in fact who He says He is. And He will do exactly what He says He will do. James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, this is going to be on the screen, says this. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. How many of you in here have joy when you face struggle? That's a lot easier said than done, right? Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. In fact, can I read this from the paraphrase of the Message just real quick? This isn't on the screen, but I'm going to read this just real quick. It's the same verses, just in a paraphrase edition of the Bible. It says this: Consider it a sheer gift, my friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure, your faith life is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work so that you become mature and well-developed, not deficient in any way. Can I tell you, and I think both of us felt this way when we were going through what we did, the faster it could be over, the better. I think we can agree that when we go through things, the faster it gets over, the better. That's what we all first think, right? We don't want to endure it any longer than we have to. But what do we know about refinement? Sometimes refining takes a while. And it's not easy. And it hurts. And sometimes it means God prunes people out of your life, and things out of your life, and situations out of your life, and struggles out of your life. But if we'll hang on, a lot of times God will replace, replenish, and renew the years of the locust in our lives. So I want to give you 4 quick things that are practical to leave out on today. So we can. Here's the thing about Scripture: we need to study it in a discussion, okay? But there needs to be a practicality part that you can put into play day to day. So let's talk practicality for just a minute. Here's the first thing: emotional and physical pain will test your faith. In a discussion. Emotional and physical pain will test your faith. There is no getting around this reality. What you go through in life, whether it be personal, professional, doesn't matter. It's going to test your faith. And God is dependent on you for how you're going to respond to it. So you need to prepare yourself. Because if you're not going through pain right now, it's coming. Now, I don't want you to sit around and wait and wonder when it's going to hit, because that's a terrible way to live. But if you're not taking care of yourself when things are good, you're going to be a mess when things get bad. To all our married couples in here and online, if you're not doing things for your marriage when things are good, you're going to be in a real heap of trouble when things are bad. Young people, if you're not doing things now, to all of us, but especially in the world we live in right now and at your ages, if you're not doing things right now to build your faith, when you're challenged, you're going to crumble. It's going to come and it's going to test your faith, so you need to be prepared. I mean, we go to college for 4 years to learn how to do a career, right? You spend 4 years prepping. You got to spend your entire life. I love what the guy said in Fireproof about his marriage. He said when he first started dating his wife, he started studying her, and he got his associate's degree. And he was doing pretty good. That's when he popped the question, you know. And then things got serious, and I got married, and he got his bachelor's degree. And he said, this is where a lot of people stop because they got the ring on the finger and they don't have to keep studying them anymore. Wrong. So he said, so now we've been married, I forget how many years it was, and now they've been married, got a master's degree, but then he's working on a PhD. Our life with Jesus should be like that. Our life with our family should be like that. Our life with our friends should be like that. Because it's going to test your faith. Number 2, suffering produces perseverance. Suffering produces perseverance. In today's culture, the one thing that everybody wants to do is quit. You're hearing a pet peeve of mine right now, okay? Every couple that I have worked, not every couple, but a vast majority of couples that I have worked with since everything that happened with us, many of them walk in wanting to quit. Sometimes it's not both of them. Sometimes it's one of them. Suffering is intended to produce perseverance. Make us better. Make us to be able to endure things. Because look, that one thing might be happening right now and it might be hard, but guess what? There's something else coming down the road. I got a friend right now. His name is Chris Rice. He's a worship pastor at a church in North Carolina. Him and his lead pastor drove up here last year, and we taught them some things about how to do some video stuff in their church. And I've known Chris. We were at Osborne Baptist Church in Eden, North Carolina together before we came here. Chris had to wear an LVAD device for a while because he had a major heart episode when he was younger, and then he had another one when he was older in life, and his heart literally quit. And they had to put this LVAD device in him until he could get a transplant. And this thing, basically, he wore this belt pack and depended on batteries to keep his heart going. Can you imagine walking around with that stress all the time? But he did it, and God used him, and Chris and I led worship together at OBC, and I watched God use Chris in a big way. Well, just 2 weeks ago, Chris is doing great, by the way. Chris got a transplant. He started, he still couldn't, he was so mad. He got so skinny during that thing with the LVAD, and then he's trying to put on weight, and he can't. He's like, I'm so mad because everybody gets mad about putting on weight, and I can't put on any. And so we used to joke about that all the time because he got so skinny. But just 2 weeks ago, Chris and Angie, his wife, they lost their son unexpectedly. He's like 28, had a 3-year-old son, completely unexpected. And I remember them putting on there, on Facebook, saying, I don't know why God's doing this, but I trust him. I don't know why God's doing this, but I trust him. And that's the attitude that we need to have when we experience hurt and pain. Here's the third thing. Perseverance strengthens your relationship with Jesus. Perseverance strengthens your relationship with Jesus. You ever heard people, they talk about, like, don't pray for patience? Okay? If you really want to endure a struggle, pray for patience, and you just don't, okay? Just don't. But as you deal with suffering that's producing perseverance, it will strengthen your relationship with Jesus. Can I tell you something? My wife will tell you I am not a perfect person. I am far from perfect. But I'll tell you what the last 6.5 years has done for me. It's made me into a different husband, into a different dad, into a different pastor, into a different friend. I don't do anything like I used to do it anymore because life looks a lot different now than it did prior to 6.5 years ago. And it changed my relationship with Jesus in a way that caused my eyes to see people and the world differently. I would never, ever, ever choose to go through what I went through, and I'm sure many of you never would either. But I also know that I would never give back what I've learned. I'll never get back the lessons that God's taught me. Here's the last thing. Without suffering, you would be incomplete. If life was easy from the point you were born until the time you die, you will have missed out on some of the greatest blessings that life ever has to offer. Suffering completes part of you that you don't really want to have to complete. But after you complete it, you're so glad that you did. At times, nothing wakes us up to see God's presence more than pain. Have you ever heard somebody say this? They are just not going to get it until they hit rock bottom. There's some people in my life who I have tried and tried and tried, but I can't make those decisions for them. I've tried to help them. But it's going to take rock bottom pain for God to get their attention. And I'm going to be very transparent with you right now. And they're not here right now, and they may be watching online, I don't know, and they may not even know who I'm talking about, but I'm sure some of them probably do. I pray that God will let them hit rock bottom. Not because I will have ill will for them in their life, but they need a real encounter with the Holy Spirit of a living God. And the only way that's going to happen is if they hit rock bottom. C.S. Lewis had a book called The Problem of Pain, and he said this: we can ignore even pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. I'm going to show you in on a, you might say that's too much information. But when things were the hardest in my life, do you want to know the place I found the most solace? It was my shower. You know why? It was the one place that I could get away by myself. It was the one place I could cry and didn't have to worry about seeing the tears. And I did a lot of shouting and a lot of hollering in that shower in those days. Everybody has somewhere. My shower became my prayer closet. And in that prayer closet, where God used his megaphone to rouse my deaf heart. Now, I know this is very different type of demeanor and message than a lot of times when I give, but when Hilton called me Friday and said, hey man, I'm going to have to ask you to preach last minute, and he told me what the title, which I already knew what today's was, but I wasn't thinking in the moment, I cringed. But I believe God had a purpose for that. And now here's what I want you to know. God has a purpose for you. If you're watching online, if you're in this house, I want you to know that God is not allowing you to endure what you're enduring for no reason. And sometimes people around us make decisions. And please hear me when I say this. There are people in your life, as hard as you try to live for the will of God, they're not going to. And it's going to hurt you. And it's going to hurt bad. And I want you to know that God has not forgot you. He will walk with you. He will be with you. And he loves you more than you could ever imagine. So if it's tough right now, hang on, hold tight, and keep your head up. Who knows, 6.5 years later, you might be sitting in the pulpit at Bethel Baptist Church saying, God has a purpose for the pain. You never know what God's going to do with where you're at or where you've been. Don't ever take it for granted.
Hey, if you enjoyed today's message, we want to encourage you to like it or share it on social media. Also, head over to our website, BethelBaptistVA.com, or our mobile app and click on the giving link where you can help us continue to share the message of Jesus across the world. God bless you and have an awesome week.